Welcome to Fan4Racing Radio. We are here for our NASCAR Hot Topics Sound Off, episode number 2510. And joining me for tonight's show is Jay Huseman and myself, Fan4Racing Sharon.
Well, Talladega does what Talladega does. I think anything anybody was looking for from a Talladega race, it delivered. I mean, we had some wrecks, maybe not the big one, but there were definitely some tangles up. I guess that would be the one thing it was maybe lacking, was the actual big one.
It didn't have a big one, but I was okay with that. Why don't we start with that as far as our hot topics are concerned. That was the skill versus luck at Talladega.
Well, and that kind of ties into it, I think. I know they were doing a lot of driver questioning on that in the pre-race show, both Saturday and Sunday. So it kind of made me wonder, and you do see a lot of the same drivers up at the top of the field every super speedway race. I'm not saying there is no luck, by no means, and any driver will tell you that. Again, whether it's a parts failure or something happening on the track, there's always that element of luck. But I think it was William Byron said 60-40, 60% skill, 40% luck. I think it goes a little bit higher than that. But bad luck is also luck, and then you got the argument that you create your own luck. You'd be out in front, run in front of it. So there certainly is some luck, but I do think it still involves a high amount of driver skill. Because when you talk about, say, if you're having the big one, being in it, if you had the skill, you'd be in front of it or not cause it, in how you bump and how you touch and everything else. So I think the more skill all drivers have, now, that could, and I'm not going to label anybody, but if somebody else doesn't have the skill and takes out a car or two, that may bring it to your bad luck.
Okay, well, is it my turn?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Denny Hamlin was talking a little bit about that. Drivers are a little bit selfish when it comes to super speedway racing. My first brush was, I'm thinking that we saw a great deal of skill on the track. And I still think that a great deal of skill on the track this weekend at Talladega Super Speedway, because we didn't have the big wreck. But I saw some video footage that kind of showed how the drivers are kind of slowing the pack down. And when they slow that pack down, when they're at the front and you slow the pack down, it's very difficult to find a way to get out and get around these drivers. So I can see some of the frustration that drivers have when it comes to being able to pass in those big packs. And it is a bit of strategy play by the people at the front of the pack that are preventing that from happening. I don't think you can blame the track necessarily for that. You got to blame what's happening between the drivers. But again, it comes down to a lot of skill in order for them to implement that kind of a strategy play on the track. So, there is a little bit of luck if you've got other drivers that are taking care of their cars, trying to drive defensively enough to be able to be there at the end. To be able to win, you got to be in the race. And I think that's what these guys have kind of come to the conclusion of. You got to take care of your equipment. You got to do a lot of proactive and reactive racing in this race on a super speedway or a drafting style track in order to be there at the end. And I think they figured out how to do that. They can do it more at Talladega than they can probably at Atlanta or Daytona, because they've got a much wider track that they're dealing with. But that's why you're seeing 3 wide, sometimes 4 wide on the track. But it still makes it really difficult to pass. So, but again, you can't blame the track for that. you've got to blame the people that are up at the front slowing things down and keeping you back there as part of their strategy play. Is it good or bad? I don't know. I like seeing skill versus wrecking on display at a track like Talladega Super Speedway. But I do think the drivers are playing each other on the track. And they've got to figure out how to play back when that happens. And when they do play back is when you see the big wrecks. And they're opting not to play back, I think, at this point, to avoid the wreck so that they can be there at the end to try to go after the win. So if you get yourself mired back in that pack, man, it's frustrating, I'm sure, for those drivers.
Well, and that's where, the skill, like I said, part of the skill is to be out front. And I thought there's a great example of kind of what you're saying of it. It depends on both sides, and I'm just going to use two cars. I said I wouldn't give names, but the situation between Ross Chastain and it happened to be Denny Hamlin, who's the one that got caught by it. But pulling up in front of them as they had the momentum, they had pitted and they were in a line. The Toyotas were smoking to the front, and Chastain pulled up and broke them up, which, as the broadcasters were saying, that's what you got to do. And Chastain is one that's willing to take that risk. Now, was there some luck involved there of not causing the big one? Because had they wrecked, that would have been the big one.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think who the driver was that got by, and then Denny Hamlin being second is the one. And I do think he checked up and kind of let it happen.
Carson Hocevar got by.
Oh, you're right, because it was a Chevy. You're right. It was a Chevy in front of the Toyotas because he chose to pit with the Toyotas. That's right. He was leading the pack of Toyotas. So you're right. It was Hocevar that got by. Now, that's even more coincidental than that another Chevy of Chastain split it up and stopped actually the Toyotas. But, there again, did Denny Hamlin, had he stayed in the gas and given Chastain a nudge, would have at least caused one car a wreck, if not the big one. And he chose to kind of then just get in the line. And I'm trying to think at the end here. Let me look on the rundown. Yeah, Bubba Wallace was the top finishing Toyota in 8th. And then you got to go back to Tyler Reddick. And they weren't even in that group, 14th and 15th. Let me find Hamlin in the group he was leading. Yeah, finished right behind Chastain in 21st. Because you had Riley Herbst, who else was there with them? Well, maybe those two are the two that really got hung up because everybody else was out. So, yeah, some of them then, but there too, because that bogs down one lane. And there again, you talk about, is that luck or skill to be in the right lane? Think about when you're driving in traffic. You always seem like the other lane's moving, so you switch lanes, right? Is that luck or is that skill? I mean, it's really tough to define, but and I know we call it a wild card weekend. We know that the ability for anybody to win is there. But when you look at it, it's a lot of times the same top contending drivers and teams. So that means there has to be some skill there. And I think it is more prevalent than the luck.
Well, let me just say, I think it's luck at the front where the guy is making or not luck, it's skill at the front where the guy's choosing which lane he wants to get in front of. He's analyzing his situation. He's choosing the lane that he thinks is going to give him the best advantage. The luck is for those guys in the back. You have no control over which lane that guy's going to choose and which lane he's going to end up holding up when that happens. So you don't really have a choice when you get somebody who's blocking and intentionally holding up that lane. So if you follow what I'm saying there.
No, that's true. And that was one where I think all the drivers admitted of when it comes to being in or around the wreck, it's definitely maybe more luck there than, not that you don't show some skill trying to drive through it, but if a car's spinning in front of you, you don't really know where they're going to go because it can change at any moment, be up over you if it turns sideways and gets in the air and all of a sudden you're underneath them. But as a whole, I do think it's a lot of skill. And I thought that the Cup Series definitely showed that this weekend by not having the big one. And again, I'll give credit to Denny Hamlin. He knew that if he'd have kept pushing, it may cost him, wherever he finished 21st, but he was going to finish that way too if he'd have run into Chastain and they'd all wrecked too. So I'll give kudos to Denny Hamlin for making a wiser decision there.
And I give kudos to all the drivers, because I think there were a lot of wise decisions that were made in racing at Talladega Superspeedway and avoiding the proverbial big one. I enjoyed seeing the skill on display at Talladega versus the quick decision making that puts them in an awkward situation that causes a big wreck. I'd rather see the skill versus the big wreck. And I know not everybody agrees with that. I'm in the minority probably, but I love seeing the skill on display and watching the talent of the drivers, because it is if you haven't been to a big track like Talladega Superspeedway or Daytona International Speedway and watch these guys driving within inches of each other, going close to 200 miles per hour, and 3 wide across the track. And at Talladega, you're talking 4 wide. It's breathtaking to see them race lap after lap after lap, and not be able to wreck. I think it's amazing that we don't see more big ones, but it was on full display. And I read a stat where the last 4 consecutive races at Talladega Speedway have had 4 cautions. So this is a trend that's been happening at Talladega that I think is a pretty amazing stat.
It is, and you're right. When it comes to that, I would definitely rather see some good racing. And I know the racing in the middle of the pack, like you said, is really tough because you really don't have anywhere to go. However, and I got to go back and rewatch this, they pointed out that Bubba Wallace went from 20th, I think, to up to 8th in those final laps. And we haven't seen the likes of that since, I think, back to Dale Earnhardt and Kenny Wallace. You get somebody behind you and pushes you and you make your way through. So I wasn't able to, or I wasn't focused on it, I guess, to really see that. And I don't know if by the one broadcast you can, if they weren't focused on it. But, it's been a while since we've seen that. And I wish I had the answer in. I'm not a big fan of the pack racing. Sharon, you and I have talked about this, the 2x2 deal, when they would do a 2x2 tandem. I thought you saw a lot more racing. And then you had the skill of they could only do it for so long, and they had to swap one car to the other based on the second car overheating and needing to be out front. And they would work through that. They'd coordinate it. Was it great racing? I don't know if I'd call it great racing, but I thought it was good. I mean, you at least didn't have the pack racing where somebody in the middle couldn't go. You just had to find you a partner you worked with, and the two of you work together and go together.
Exactly right. Now, I want to include in here too, Jay, at lap 47 or somewhere around that, they were trying to get to pit road. And you had the situation where the people at the front of that line that was going to pit road had to slow down to meet pit road speed. And you had that accordion effect that got a few drivers caught up in that. I think Blaney was caught up in that. Keselowski was caught up in
Brad
that.
was.
And they couldn't slow down fast enough because the accordion effect of slowing down to get on pit road. That's what happens when you get these packs that are racing. And that's sometimes what causes the big one too. So I don't know if it was I don't want to call it necessarily a spotter or not enough time to react. I'm not sure, but I think they learned very early on when that happens, you've got to really be on your toes for anybody who's slowing down up toward the front and have that quick reaction to it. But that's what caused that wreck. And these guys just didn't get slowed down in time.
Well, and I think it was Denny Hamlin that bumped Christopher Bell when Christopher Bell spun and then took Stenhouse with him. They were on the front row and Hamlin was pushing, which, is what you do and expected. They talked about the Toyotas have a little bit more of a pointed front, and then the bumper doesn't line up as well. But that was Hamlin's answer. Question was, why did he slow down? So yeah, he wasn't expecting Bell to be slowing down. He should have been running up through the gears. Maybe he didn't get up to speed as fast. So
Right.
There is a lot that goes into that, and that's one of those of just a little bit of luck. Same as those, as you mentioned, coming onto pit road. I don't know where the miscue was. Somebody obviously, there was a miscue somewhere.
Yes.
that started it. And I don't even know if you could pinpoint. I know I watched that one a couple of times.
It's hard.
To find out, Brad was right in the middle of it, and he felt it wasn't his fault. He said he didn't see where he could have done anything different. That is one where you just have to chalk it up to, unfortunately, the bad luck of being involved in it. But yeah, he said, I didn't see anything I could have done differently or should have done differently.
Well, and again, you're kind of counting on people to tell you what's going on in front of you, because I will say too, I think I've heard from a lot of drivers, it's hard to see what's happening 2 or 3 cars in front of you.
Hold on. Whoops, sorry.
Yeah, I heard an echo going on there.
Well, it was actually playing the show because that's where I had our hot topics pulled up.
Oh, that's why I put it in our chat feature.
Yeah.
Our private chat. But anyway, yeah, it's just one of those things. And I don't want to put all the blame on the spotter, but it's one of those things you can't see what's happening 2 or 3 cars in front of you. And so it's not your fault if you can't see, but you've got to rely on somebody telling you what's happening up in front of you. And it's just logical too, I think, when you're coming into pit road, you've got to anticipate that the cars 2 or 3 cars in front of you are slowing down to meet that pit road minimum speed.
Yeah, I say, and I didn't see any kind of telemetry breakdown where they tried to determine who was at fault. But obviously there was a checkup, like you said, and then it becomes the accordion effect. Yeah. It's more prevalent at your super speedways, but we see that even on a 1.5 mile or a short track at times, especially on restarts. When you talk about restarts, if the guys in the back are ready to go and they hold up just even that fraction of a second, everybody gets bogged down, then they go, you see what you call that accordion effect.
Yeah, and I think drivers have gotten a little bit better at anticipating that, but we did see a couple of incidents there, and you mentioned one, pit road was another one, where, the accident happened. But those were minimal compared to what could have happened. Let me just put it that way. It was minimal because you had people doing that anticipation. And I think that's what it takes. You've got to drive with anticipation at Talladega and Daytona and Atlanta and anticipate that those drivers at the front are slowing down to meet the pit road speed. And so you've got to slow down too ahead of time.
Well, other than that, I mean, I did overall thought it was a good race. Unfortunately, then the finish got altered a little bit. If we want to go to that as our next hot topic. Oh,
okay, we can do that. You want to introduce it?
Was it Joey Logano, the 22 team from Roger Penske, and Ryan Preece from RFK? Both got disqualified. Joey Logano's was for a bolt in the spoiler that was loose, that was required to be tight. And Ryan Preece was for an extra shim somewhere in the spoiler, when you're only allowed to have 2. And from what I found, as far as I know, at this point, neither one are appealing. I haven't seen an official statement from Team Penske on the 22, but it didn't sound like it.
Yeah, neither one of them are appealing, Jay.
Okay. Like I said, I hadn't seen an official, but it didn't sound like either one of them were gonna. The Ryan Preece deal, they admitted they had put that extra shim in there, and this one's kind of I understand where some fans talk about pre-race inspection. The spoiler wasn't meeting the requirement during pre-race. They put that extra shim in there then so that the spoiler angle would be legit and meet requirements. And yeah, in my mind at that point, maybe somebody should have said, but again, it's not NASCAR's job to stop them. If they catch it pre-race and allow them to change it, that's a benefit. That's a nicety. You have to be legal come post-race. So not saying it's their job, but yeah, you would have thought they wouldn't have done something illegal to fix something that wasn't right trying to go through pre-race, but and that's why they aren't appealing. The Joey Logano Team 22 one, I don't know what it costs to do an appeal or what the whole process entails. A bolt on the spoiler, I think, is one that certainly there could be an argument made that it came during the race. But they have chosen not to. So maybe they knew they didn't have it as tight as they should have or whatever. There again, it kind of indicates they know they're guilty, but that one, I like I said, I don't know if it's really worth the time and effort to go through it. Although with where Joey's at in points, if they really thought it was a legit case, I think they'd take it because it hurt him in points again.
Yeah, I've got more details on not only the team statements from both organizations, but also the actual rule that was violated in both cases. So in the case of Ryan Preece, the spoiler may be shimmied between the polycarbonate face and the base. If shims are used, gaps will not be permitted between the spoiler face and the spoiler face and the spoiler base. The spoiler face must be flush to the base at either the top or the bottom, depending on the angle change required. For super speedway events, a minimum of 2 full width single piece graduated carbon fiber shims will be the only permitted method of altering the spoiler angle. The spoiler shims must conform to the following drawing and CAD files, and they do give a drawing in what I'm looking at here that was posted by Bob Pockris. Bob is so good about getting this information for everybody. On the situation for the rule for Logano's violation, it says for super speedway events, spoiler braces must be used and spoiler braces must be painted black. Spoiler braces must consist of the parts outlined in their diagram. They give a diagram here, and it talks about the bolts and everything that was the violation for Joey Logano. Now, hold on, let me go back here. Team Penske, let me do RFK's statement first. RFK's statement on the number 60 disqualification at Talladega. RFK Racing acknowledges and accepts NASCAR's decision to disqualify the number 60 Ford Mustang following post-race inspection at Talladega and will not appeal the ruling. The infraction stemmed from an unintentional adjustment during pre-race inspection to correct a spoiler angle issue. While the change did not provide a competitive advantage, and that's their point of view, it did not meet the approved compliance method, and we respect the ruling and remain committed to integrity and adherence to NASCAR standards. On Team Penske's side, their statement reads, the number 22 Team Penske Ford Mustang was disqualified following the post-race inspection at Talladega today. One of the 18 bolts on the surface of the spoiler that connect to the base was found to be loose, and NASCAR penalized the team as a result. This was not intentional and happened throughout the course of the race event. Team Penske accepts the disqualification. and that's where it ends for them. So I just wanted to give the actual details of the actual rule and the disqualification statements from each of the teams. But I think they were both wise not to appeal those disqualifications, because the diagrams that they give in both of those cases are pretty clear, as well as in the shim situation, they're very clear. They will only allow 2 shims, and you can't use that as a means of adjusting the spoiler angle that's required for super speedway racing.
Yeah, that's where I said for RFK, they admitted it. They knew they had done it, and they were outside the line using more than what was allowed. The one that Penske, where they make the statement that, well, it happened during the race. However, we're going to accept the penalty that it was done intentionally by that one to me, like I said, seems shaky as far as admitting guilt or not, which they did not, but. That kind of, like, if you really believe it happened during the race, you would make that case and argument, even if it comes out on the losing end. Because again, the ultimate is, well, you should have had it tighter, or something else to prevent it from coming loose. I get that, but like I said, that to me, I don't know. But like I said,
because and you're like right, they should have had it tighter. If it came loose during the race, it's still your fault.
And that's one where I can see that even if they feel it did come loose during the race, that they feel they're going to lose because it could have been tighter. When you talk about a ride height, if that's because somebody else run into you or you brush the wall or whatever, you have more justification of, hey, we couldn't have done anything different prior to the race to have prevented that. So, and that's why I said, I know it costs them money and it takes time and effort in order to do an appeal. So I understand it. Like I said, just when I hear them say, well, we really didn't do anything wrong, but we're not going to fight it. Yeah, it makes you wonder. But
and I don't know how you can say it didn't improve their performance on the track when he was running second.
Well, and that's what, again, you don't know that. I mean, could it have? Most certainly. I mean, that's why the rules are there. There's a reason for the rules. Even if it is that slight quarter inch of something that gives you that quarter inch of downforce, is what we talked about last week. The spoiler, the anger of the spoiler, that certainly allows less drag if the spoiler gives any amount more than somebody else's. So there definitely would be. And I know you can make the argument, well, it doesn't matter because you're in a pack and you can't go anywhere anyway. But again, that you can't use that as the excuse, because if it does in single car or just by yourself, if you are able to get outside of that and have less drag and can more horsepower, whatever it be, you can take advantage of it, So I understand that and I agree with the rules. I mean, I don't understand them. Let me back that up. I don't necessarily fully understand every part of all of them, but they are there for a reason. So yeah, like I said, it just kind of caught me off guard that Penske wasn't appealing theirs. Like I said, RFK, it says you can only use 2, you have 3. I mean, you got no argument.
Exactly. There's no argument there. Yeah, I wanted to look here because let me just check something out. They did take some cars back to the media center to the R&D center to do some further investigation. The cars of Kyle Larson, Ty Dillon, Josh Berry, and Bubba Wallace are returning to the R&D Center for engine dyno. The number 5 and 21 will also be inspected. So we'll find out if those cars have anything on them after they do their R&D breakdown. I think after super speedway races, they need to do that. They need to take those cars back.
Well, and I didn't catch that the 5 and 21 was separate as far as a teardown inspection versus, the 4, one from every manufacturer. They're going to do the dyno test. That you're right. I think is a necessary thing, and NASCAR is going to keep on doing, because again, if you give them the little bit of an inch or leeway of, hey, we're not inspecting this week, you're probably going to have some ingenuity come next week or next race when they run the super speedway. So I think that is a good thing, and they have to keep doing there. Again, I understand that costs money, and there's a lot of that goes into it, but that's necessary. I mean, it really is.
It is. We want to see a legitimate champion that we crown at the end of the season. You don't want to see somebody who's been getting by with little things like these kind of things throughout the year. You want the champion to be somebody who's done it the legitimate way. And NASCAR does the best they can to make sure that happens.
That's one of those. I know when they talk about that of time and money spent of why do they do a pre-race? Why do they do a post-race? Because if not, it'd be nice if everybody just did what they were supposed to. And that's in the world, let alone racing,
Yes, exactly right. Okay. Anything more that you want to say on that subject?
Well, this isn't really on the topic of them getting disqualified. And I know both of them talked about the appeal. Ryan Preece, really, they have no leg to stand on, but man, they got to tighten that up. We know he's in a position of having run really well, but it brought him, in his case, actually from inside the playoff bubble to outside. I don't remember what it showed. I looked at a point standings before and after comparison, and he was so many points in. Now he's 28 points out. Joey Logano in a little bit different position. How many points he's in by is where he's still at. He's 11th in points with the penalties, tied in 11th or tied for 10th, actually, but doesn't have a top 5. And that's even more ironic. That would have been Joey Logano's first top 5 of the year, and it got taken away. I also look at, though, I think Logano is, just based on history, the team and everything else, in a stronger position to rebound and stay in the playoff position. Ryan Preece, not so much, and that's not on him. It is a new team, and Brad talked about that prior in the pre-race of what that whole organization this year, having a third team and the strain it's put on him, what they're doing to try and work through that, himself included. Unfortunately, he's down in 32nd in points. I was kind of where he was addressing it, but for a team like that, we talk about that before. These less funded teams have a tendency to not push the envelope because they can't afford to take any kind of hit, points, monetary at all, because they just aren't capable of it.
Exactly right. And I will say too that there's some talk. Sal and I were talking earlier about whether or not we'd hear more penalties coming this week. And I wanted to get your thoughts about that, Jay.
Don't know. I mean, we'll see what the dyno results.
For Logano and Preece.
Oh, I got you. For those, no. Based on what we've seen in the past, I would have to say no. If it's something like that of a part during the race and they catch it post-race and they DQ them, I think that is the penalty, because, again, it wipes out 60 points, up to 60 points, possibly, or thereabouts. So I think that is on the one, and I'm trying to think if that was with Jesse Loves, that even with the DQ, then had they taken away 50 points, well, that's the equivalent of putting them in last place finish. I think a lot of times when NASCAR does that, if they penalize the 50 points or whatever they determine, that is essentially taking one race away from, or the equivalent of DQing them for one race. On average, it could be they only earned 10 points that race and they actually didn't lose as much by the points penalty as they would have by the outright DQ. But so I think NASCAR does a good job with that, of if it And I don't know there if it's something that they feel is more intentional, or if it's just because they didn't catch it and they can't DQ them from the race itself. For example, if it's one of the cars that goes back to the R&D and they find something that's hidden and, able to get through regular inspection pre and post race, then they're like, hey, you're doing something really sneaky. We're going to add an additional. And in this case, I don't think it was, because, again, Logano's team said, hey, it happened during the race. And RFK said, you're right. We know when we did it. We know why or how we did it, what we did, and we accept the DQ itself. So I would say no, but again, it would depend on. NASCAR has that right. I'll put it that way.
Yeah. I could see it happening if it were to continue to find these kinds of things. I think NASCAR has to take another level to it. And I think that next level would be to disqualify the crew chief and take him out of the next X number of races. And I don't know how effective that really is, but I think there has to be another level to it at some point. If it were to continue, if you have a second infraction, then, the race is already over. So there's not much you can do with regard to the actual crew chief, but there has to be another level, maybe a monetary fine that is really a stiff monetary fine, or something that takes it to another level. The other thing that would take it to another level would be additional points.
There you go.
Well, if you take additional, or the playoff points, you take all accumulated playoff points away. So that they're in a deficit there and they've got to make that up. There's got to be another level to the penalty if it continues. And I think that's where NASCAR maybe can do additional penalties at another level, if you will.
I know that's kind of an old rehash of a hot topic, but you're right. I'm with you on the tiered situation. Now, there again, it's a question of, if it's the same penalty but a little bit different. But I think taking the crew chief thing is no longer effective, and we've had that discussion multiple times in this day and age. And the drivers and teams admit that there really isn't that big an impact. Is it nice to have them there directly? Yes, but when they're still communicating. And I know we talked about this that NASCAR should bring them to the track, put them in a booth up in the tower or whatever, in a timeout room where they can't have any contact. That really is the only way for that to truly be effective.
They gotta go to a penalty box.
Right. I mean, because otherwise, they talk about it. They're in communication with the war room back at their home shop. And there really isn't that big a difference other than the at-track presence, and I just don't think that's holding. Same with the monetary. I mean, in this day and age, we've seen it. A monetary fine just doesn't seem to get it done. When you start taking points, especially playoff points, or starting in a hole, that gets their attention, no doubt. Yes,
it does. And I think it should apply if they are doing it repeatedly. At some point, they've got to understand that NASCAR is trying to change the culture, which is not allowing you to do that. Now, if we want to go to the next hot topic, and it kind of ties into this, it's the NASCAR talking about the possibility of the All-Star race being a run what you brung possibility. This is NASCAR's way of giving them a chance to experiment and do whatever they were going to do to the race cars and test it out on the track. And yet Denny Hamlin came out and said, oh, but that would cost us $2 million to be able to do that. Listen to Jeff Gluck's podcast. He went on a rant about you can't have it both ways. You can't ask NASCAR to give you the leeway to do those things, and then when they give you the leeway, complain about how much it cost. So a lot of conversation with regard to that. What are your thoughts?
I've forgotten. I hadn't listened to Denny Hamlin. I knew he was going to address it this week. Which side would you like me to start with? Because I'll argue both sides. As a fan, for a one race, I said this when it came to the rules of the All-Star, the changes they made to the All-Star. It's an exhibition race. It's for fans. It's for the entertainment. I'm all about it. Do whatever you want to do. Run them backwards. I don't care. Okay. So from that aspect, yes, I'm in favor of it, and it would be interesting to see. However, from the other side of a team, and I'll start with the cost, if that's where Denny Hamlin was coming from it, for one race, once per year, and they don't even know if they would do this again next year. So it might be a one-time only. Yeah, having what you're going to run into is the top teams are going to be the top teams even more so because they have the money to invest into a one race or a one-off. I know he kind of addressed that even with, okay, for this race, we'll increase horsepower, not just allow whatever you want, but increase it to test it. But if they don't feel they're going to get an investment from it long term, that's where they said that what's the point? So if they were to just say, okay, for this one race, NASCAR might have been trying to feel out and see how more horsepower would work on the short track package. I don't know, but then they need to set that of, hey, we'll allow you. Because if they allow it, teams are going to do it. They might whine about the money, but they're going to do it. If they can run more horsepower, they're going to do it because they want to be competitive. I mean, we see that in everything we talk about. They're going to take every advantage they can get. But as I mentioned, if it is only for one race, well, then is that money well spent? Yeah, probably not. Like I said, from a fan perspective, absolutely. And I got no problem with that. If you have a track that runs a outlaw class or whatever, I'm fine with that as long as that's what that class is and people that have the money want to go do it, I'm all for it. But if you want competition and keeping everybody within said rules, then I also see where it's kind of be like, hey, we'll give you the opportunity to play around. What happens if they find something they think they can sneak by NASCAR during the rest of the regular season? And that's another aspect to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's kind of an interesting concept. I understand what you're saying. It's a lot of money to spend for one race. But I understand what Jeff Gluck is saying too. You're always complaining you want more horsepower. And NASCAR said the reason they don't is because of the cost. And you're still complaining about NASCAR. There's something to be said there. So he's in essence validating NASCAR's argument for not having more horsepower because it is cost prohibitive. And it hurts the smaller teams more than it hurts the bigger teams. And again, at a race like this, you're going to help the teams that want to spend that money are going to spend it. And they're going to be the teams with the money. The teams without the money can't do it because it's cost prohibitive and they might just opt out of the race. I mean, why would you race a race when you can't compete with the other cars? So right. I don't know. I think it illustrates, I think it puts drivers like Denny Hamlin out there on the spot and says, okay, this is your chance to do it. Do you want to spend the $2 million that it's going to cost you? Because that's what it's going to cost. And, to do it going forward, that's what it's going to cost all the teams. And to me, it's going to hurt the sport in the long run. So why do it? Because you're going to, in essence, put these lower funded teams kind of out of play because they can't afford to do it. So I don't think it's a good idea. But I like the concept. The concept's great from a fan perspective, they don't have to worry about the cost because they're fans. They're just paying the ticket cost to get there. And it would be fun to watch an outlaw series, like you say, be able to do whatever you want to do. But that's not NASCAR's top series. It just isn't. So I just don't think in the long run it's really a good idea. Exhibition, maybe they put a limit on it. Maybe this is where they put a cap on it. You can only spend this much money to run what you brung. Spend it however you want, but this is the cap on what you can spend. But how they monitor that, I have no idea. That's the problem with it.
That's one of those, yeah, it sounds good on paper, but again, then what additional things does that bring? Now you got to have somebody that, like you said, monitors. You got to have proof of that. In this case, I will defend Denny Hamlin's stance of for one race, the money invested in one race to do so.
And I get that.
So I don't know if I could fully agree with Gluck. However, it might have been an opportunity to, if they said, okay, we'll do it for this one race and it goes good, to come back to NASCAR and say, see, let us do it. And if we do it for the whole season or, long term, then the cost isn't as much. And again, I don't know. I don't have the numbers. I think it was Brad Keselowski. It must
not be that much. If it's $2 million for one race.
I'm trying to think if Brad Keselowski was one of them. Anyway, a couple of the drivers said that if by increasing the horsepower and having it that way all the time, that overall would not be that kind of like the next gen car of, you have the initial investment, but once you get it settled in, long term isn't really all that much different. I don't know that. Like I said, what it would take initially to redo the engines, there's going to be a cost. But once you are to maintain having that amount of horsepower. Here's the other thing I thought about, though. As you increase horsepower and what you put on the motors, is it possible then we would see more of what we've seen in the past of blown motors? When we talk about racing nowadays, a lot of people want to point the finger that these cars are essentially indestructible. And that's an extreme, but there is a point to that. We don't see blown motors, and it's tough to make that argument, especially with Ryan Blaney, who blew 3 in a row. But it was Chocolate Myers on Dave Moody. He said they used to blow 2 or 3 just during their practice sessions because they put so much on them. Yes, they're better nowadays with that. As they said, it used to be that they would take a streetcar motor and try and run it. Now they build race engines. But the interest level and the amount of shakeup during a race may change then based on that. If you do see more of these top guys that are running max horsepower, blow the motor and drop out, then you have other guys that maybe don't have as much horsepower and their motor holds up. So there's an interesting thought there anyway when it comes to that.
Well, and how big is North Wilkesboro? Isn't that where the All-Star race is?
Yeah, half mile.
Half mile. So we're talking short tracks. I'm still trying to understand how increasing the horsepower on a short track event is going to help improve the racing. To me, it just doesn't make sense. It's not the place to increase your horsepower.
I can try and argue that, and again, I'm not a engineer, but they talk about with the Xfinity cars, comparing it to the Xfinity, there's throttle control. So if you have more horsepower, and depending on how you tune it, have your car set up. When you come off the corner, if you can get to the gas sooner, any track, the sooner you can get onto the gas, drive a little harder into the corner and then brake and get power back.
Drive a little harder into the corner, and that's where you're going to blow the engine.
Well, and there's that risk versus reward from that side as well, then, of how hard you're pushing. But I think that's what when they're saying they want more horsepower, is that ability to control via the throttle. That And I think it was Kyle Larson, even after he had dominated in the Xfinity Series, said something about that. He liked that series because when you step on the gas, there's power there. So that's, I think, where they're coming from. Now, you also, and it's not as prevalent on asphalt as it is on dirt, but you have to have the total package. On dirt track, when the track gets dry slick and more like asphalt, certain classes you can run an open motor versus a crate motor. Yes, the open motor has more horsepower, but if the track gets dry slick, that horsepower doesn't help, and the crate motors actually have the advantage because they're steady. So, like I said, that also goes with then of if you got more power than your tires can handle, well, now you got to work with that. So I think there is something to it. Again, they've tried everything they can with the tires, so I think NASCAR maybe ought to look at it. And here's what I wanted to get to. To me, with Denny Hamlin and the teams that declined to even have this one-off opportunity, I think they should have taken it. And again, I'm not on the cost side. This is from the argumentative side. Done it, run good with it, and went back to NASCAR and said, see, this is what we can do on a short track if you let us have the horsepower.
Well, and there's something to be said for that. I'm like you, I can kind of see both sides of it. But I do think that NASCAR is giving them that chance to do some testing and implementing some of their ideas on what they think can be better. But there are going to be consequences. I think you will see more blown motors. I think that, and maybe, you've got to ask yourself, what's Ryan Blaney's team doing that's causing them to have the blown motors that they've had? Or maybe there's something in his driving style that is causing those blown motors. So they have to look at that and try to figure that out. And it happening early in the season is probably a good thing versus later in the season when they're contending for a championship. And maybe they are doing some testing there. I don't know, but it's not working for Ryan Blaney, whatever it is they're doing. So I do think that if you're given an opportunity to try something new, you should take it instead of complaining about it. And I do see Jeff Gluck's point of view as well. I understand where Denny Hamlin's coming from. I'm seeing both sides of it, the same as you. But I think Gluck does make a little bit of a point too. You can't say you want to have that opportunity, then when given that opportunity, complain about what the cost is. So he really kind of got animated about it and pretty graphic, not graphic. Well, yeah, graphic, I guess, too. But he really made the point, I think, of you got to be careful what you ask for. And then when you get it, complain about it. It just kind of, what it does is it highlights the fact that Denny does ask for one thing and then complains no matter what. When he gets it, he complains still. So be careful what you ask for. And I think there's something to be said for that too, because there are unintended consequences. And you brought up a couple of them with the blown engines as a result. And it would be kind of funny, if you ask me, if Denny Hamlin was the first engine that blows.
What's really funny here is the fact that I'm gonna be the one to kind of defend Denny Hamlin if and just the fact that these are the two sides, Jeff Gluck and Denny Hamlin. I don't know if there's beef between them, but I don't think he is fully listening to Denny Hamlin's response. It's not worth the money or cost too much to do it for one race only. Yeah. That's where, again, if given the option to, hey, for a whole year run a higher horsepower package, I think they are in favor of it. I say think, again, of that. But that's the biggest thing I heard was it's not worth it for a one race type deal. That's his point. But I also, like I said, then would say, hey, you should have used that and strengthened your argument to make it a full-time thing. So, like I said, I'm on both sides of it, but In this case, I would have to kind of defend and go with Denny Hamlin of something like that when you're talking about a major change for one race. Yeah, really isn't worth it.
And I agree with everything you're saying. I see both sides of it. I think Denny Hamlin makes a valid point, but I think Jeff Gluck makes a valid point too.
Overall, I agree. I mean, that's a lot of times the case of, yeah, you get what you want and then you still aren't happy, and that would go back to the lawsuit, but that's not on our list tonight, so we won't go there.
Yeah, we won't go there. But yeah, this is from a fan perspective, I think it would be fantastic. But there is a cost associated to it. And that's something for fans to be aware of too. But I applaud NASCAR for opening the door. And we'll see if they're talking about it as a possibility at this point. And whether or not it actually happens, I think is yet to be determined.
You know, that is, and I think that kind of overall got overlooked. You're right, of applaud NASCAR for saying, hey, we'll look at something you guys have brought up. And again, as a fan, man, I would love to see it. Go back to the Superbirds and anything else. Like I said, if that's the case, I'll make the call to Ray Evernham, be like, hey, dig that T-Rex car out. It's legal today. Get Jeff Gordon back in that T-Rex car. Let's go. That's one of those of, not to go political, but certain other documents have all been released here as of late. I would like NASCAR and Ray Evernham to release what exactly was in the T-Rex car.
I don't think that's ever going to happen. But yeah, it's kind of interesting because we could argue both sides of this argument all the way through, I think. I do think that NASCAR might consider, but again, it's an awful lot of cost. The one thing is the bigger picture, and that's what NASCAR is responsible for. On the bigger picture side of this, if NASCAR were to increase the horsepower, I think it would possibly make it very hard for the underfunded teams to take part in that. And I think it would hurt the sport in the long run. And I think that's what NASCAR looks at long-term wise. Can they find a middle road here for short track packages? Possibly in an upcoming season, they might be able to try that, but it would have to be at a lower cost and maybe not like we talk about with the negotiation side of it. Maybe you don't get everything you want there, but we'll move in that direction to where it can be cost effective, cost inclusive for all teams and not just for the higher funded teams is what I'm trying to get to.
Right. And I do think NASCAR does a great job of that. It's not just about those teams that have money, although they don't have money because they're trying to get more from NASCAR, but of looking at all the teams and the sport as a whole, not just one or a set of teams that can afford to do so. So I do think they do a good job. I actually, just off the top of my head, was kind of thinking about it. It'd be kind of interesting to think about anyway of, on a short track, we got 6 of them, aside from now Rockingham and North Wilkesboro North Wilkesboro for the All-Star race, 2 at Bristol, 2 at Richmond, and 2 at Martinsville. If for those races they didn't go to a crate style motor like they have in the Truck Series, they call it a spec engine. That is a possibility of then go with a set spec engine. Something to maybe think about or look at.
Yeah, I think you have to think about it as far as next year at this point, because of the cost that's associated with it. And
no doubt.
Know, maybe you do it as a blending into it over time kind of thing. I don't know, but it's something for NASCAR to think about. So far, they've said that they don't want to increase the cost for a new manufacturer to come into the sport. That's part of the reason. And so maybe once they get that new manufacturer into the sport, maybe they could consider it. But right now, it would be cost prohibitive, according to the new manufacturer thinking about coming into the sport.
You're right. I'm totally on that side now. I forgot about that. Thanks for bringing that up. If it's helping Dodge come back into the sport, I'm all in favor of whatever they need to do to make that happen.
So yeah, that was part of the argument on NASCAR's side. One thing that I thought NASCAR was considering doing this is I think they might have had some, I don't want to say ulterior motives, but maybe inadvertent consequences. One thing it might show is the discrepancy between the haves and the have-nots and what kind of racing that produces would show up with that North Wilkesboro race. And if you have a bunch of haves that are racing in the race, that's where I think it becomes IROC-like. And everybody's running, spending as much as they want to spend and so forth. And you don't really get that equal playing field. And right now, I love the equal playing field. I'll just say it out loud. I love the equal playing field because you do see teams that you don't normally see running in the top 10. And that, I think, is a great thing with NASCAR right now.
I fully agree with you on that. And that's where my issue with, and I'm going to say the fans in general, they talked about that of not wanting to see these guys of start and park or only 5 cars being on the lead lap, 1 car 2 laps ahead, even though then they call it the good old days of racing. But yet now when NASCAR does things to prevent that and bunch it up, then they're not happy with that either. And I've gone off on that tangent a couple of times of the fans are really fickle to me of even week to week within a series. Oh, we don't want to see everybody wreck. Well, this week then they're mad because there weren't any cautions. I just, like I said,
there wasn't a big one.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I meant, not cautions, but normally a caution comes out because of wreck. And that too of, when we talk about that, and I think it was Chocolate Myers that talked about that, you don't have as many natural cautions because, like I said, the cars are a little more durable, not fully indestructible. Again, Ryan Blaney has proved that, and hopefully they have figured out why that came. I hadn't seen any research on that as far as them saying they fixed the problem, but there certainly was something there, whether it's something the team was doing with the motor, the way Ryan Blaney drives, bad luck, I don't know. But he certainly used his up there in those first few races. Like I said, I think it was 3 weeks in a row.
Yeah, if it weren't for bad luck, he'd have no luck at all because it just has not worked out for him of late. And we know Ryan Blaney is a talented driver. Are we ready to move on?
Yeah, let's see. This one will be interesting if we'll go to Rodney Childress and Spire Motorsports. I know this one was announced early in the week right after the Easter break. That Rodney Childress and Spire Motorsports have agreed to part ways.
Yeah, they make it sound like it was a mutual agreement. They've also come out and said it had nothing to do with performance. But let me see here. Okay. Oh, that was with regard. I think I bookmarked another. Okay, I guess I didn't bookmark it. I've been trying to bookmark different things that I see on social media so that I can come back to it during the show.
Right.
But they say it wasn't for performance. It just wasn't working out. The way they make it sounds like they just realized for whatever reason, they didn't have a definitive reason. For whatever the reason, it doesn't seem to be working out from both sides. Rodney doesn't seem satisfied with what his results are, and neither is Spire Motorsports. And so it could be just one of those, the driver and crew chief might like each other, but they're not clicking together as it relates to performance. And so they're looking for other opportunities. So it's kind of interesting. They brought up somebody from within the organization, Sparks, I think is his name, to take over the crew chiefing roles at Spire Motorsports for that team. So it's kind of an interesting situation.
Are you waiting for me to give mine? Because you might have to put up or design another banner and say, again, this is completely MJ's perspective. All right.
We are speculating here.
And that's all we can. As you read from the public side of it, is a mutual agreement. Both of them just agreed that it wasn't working and going to go their separate ways. Both of them said nice things about each other. That's great. I don't believe a word of it. There was a problem there. You're talking 9 races into a season. You know, we talk about that when a team switches, a driver, a crew chief, a whatever, manufacturer. It takes time. We are 9 races in. There was a problem there. That's great. They're being nice and political and whatever, polite, but there was a problem there. So what that is, it has to be speculation because neither the two parties involved are saying what it was. I want to go back to when Rodney Childress was hired there. At that time, the number 7 flagship car, if you will, the driver was Corey LaJoie. Rodney Childress specifically said he was looking forward to working with Corey LaJoie. Well, then the team made the decision to bring in Justin Haley, and Corey LaJoie went to RWR on a part-time basis. I think that right there was the issue, because even during that time period, and I meant to go back and see if I could find the article and quote, Rodney Childress said, well, that wasn't what he was expecting when he signed with the team. However, he was going to work with the team. He had signed an agreement to work with them. I think it goes back to he was going to work with Corey LaJoie, not with necessarily Justin Haley. Not that he thinks there's something wrong there, but I really believe that it goes back to he was intent on working with Corey LaJoie. Now, during, I think it was qualifying, I just read this. I don't recall the conversation during qualifying, but they were talking about teams sharing information, and Kevin Harvick kind of got put on the spot and wouldn't directly comment. But even apparently at Stewart-Haas Racing, Rodney Childress was one that didn't like to necessarily share everything, have a full open notebook. Now, Aspire Motorsports is a smaller team and building, I think they are probably more about that than, say, Hendrick Motorsports or Joe Gibbs Racing, because all teams are fully established and running well. Not that they aren't open and share things, but in a bigger organization, I think you have a little bit more leeway to keep some things to yourself if you can. I know in this day and age, it's kind of tough, but whereas I think Spire Motorsports, the culture there is 110%. You share everything. And I think Rodney Childress might have had a problem with that.
That's some interesting takeaways, Jay.
And that, again, MJ's perspective, just from an outside viewpoint.
Oh, okay. Well, I think you made some good observations there. And again, we don't know for sure. We're not insiders. We're fans, just like a lot of other people. And so we're looking from the outside looking in. So we don't really have any way of knowing. But I think your observations are pretty good here. And, I don't know what more to say about it, to tell you the truth. I hadn't really put that much thought into it. But I'll just say, I think you have good observations there. I was surprised that Rodney Childress was leaving after the 9 races. I thought that they needed probably a little more time to kind of click and to make that work. But maybe there was a point that Rodney Childress, and again, I'm speculating, I don't know, that Rodney Childress said, it's just not working. And that's what I get from him, is those exact words. I reached a point where it was obvious it wasn't working. It was time to make a change, and I chose to make that change. So I think there's a lot of truth in that. And we'll see if Sparks does any better in that role. Do you think he's doing any better as a crew chief after what, just a couple of races, Jay? When he gets back?
Well, yeah, it's actually only been one race here at Talladega, and Talladega is a tough one to
make a judgment
to really tell. I will add to, though, the fact that there is a bigger problem, and that goes back to the beginning of April. Car chief Robert Cheddarsmith left the team and joined Ty Gibbs. So there again, that was kind of a shocker. You're talking, at that time, it was 6 or 7 races, because it was before the break, that the team was starting to have, the cracks were starting to show already there. That, you know, they brought that up. Why would a car chief leave 7 races in? Does it benefit Ty Gibbs? Hopefully so. And we have seen some improvement from Ty Gibbs.
Yes.
And there's the biggest thing that, first off, I know that, and this was from listening to Sirius XM throughout the week when it happened, you know, it might be that Rodney Childress wants to take some time away, the grind of 20, going into now 28 races without a break, be a family man, and that's a possibility. And if that's his decision, that's great. I would support that. However, as a fan and knowing his capability, I hope that he comes and lands somewhere else with the team. But on the same aspect, and there again, I go back to Brad Keselowski with RFK. Well, would you sign him? No, I take that back. I apologize. It was Colleague Racing, because it was Chris Rice on his segment on the morning drive.
Oh, okay.
And he said, talent-wise, absolutely. However, they didn't have that option, and they're moving forward with their crew chiefs, Trent Owens being one of them, said that team is just starting to gel. We don't want to disrupt it. We want to give it that time to build. So few races in, unless you are absolutely having a problem and things aren't working, you're not going to make that change, because you're still trying to wait and see if what you're doing is working. You know, they like to say it takes a time to turn a big ship in an organization.
Yes,
so
indeed.
I think during the off season, you know, there were a lot of teams that were interested in him, no doubt. Talent-wise, I think there still would be. But to make that change 9 races into a season, unless you really, something you got just isn't working, you're not going to want to take that chance. So if he takes the rest of the season off and he signs with somebody new, and maybe he doesn't at all, I don't know. But I do think he belongs in the NASCAR garage. Again, if he wants to go step away, you know, as a fan, I'm bummed, because I think he's got that talent, and you hate to see that, but you got to respect that. But yeah, there's a lot of teams I'd like to see him go with and hopefully make things work and come to a better thing. The Ford Chevy thing, I don't know if that has something to do with it. Again, that would be speculation, that maybe he works better with the Fords and has a trick up his sleeve for Fords versus it just wasn't there with Chevy. I don't know that. That's just a possibility to think about.
Yeah, I think all of those are good possibilities. You know, there is a difference between Chevy and Ford. There's a difference between Ford and Toyota, and Chevy and Toyota. So each of these crew chiefs probably have their preference of which manufacturer they like to work with. So, and it makes sense. It would take time to adjust from running Fords to running Chevys. Are they Chevy or Toyota? Spire.
Spire is a Chevy.
Oh, that's what I thought.
He came from Ford.
It would be as big between Ford and Chevy, because Stuart Haas did run Chevys for a while too, as it would be between Toyota and Ford, or Toyota and Chevy. So some interesting things to think about, and to think about with regard to a new manufacturer coming in. I know you have people who are very Dodge heavy, on their expertise. And so I don't know if Rodney Childress is one of those guys, but maybe he takes this time to acclimate himself to what a new manufacturer would be and looks for an opportunity in that respect. So there's
now, Sharon, why you want to get my hopes up like that? Because I remember going through that, and I was a big Jeff Gordon fan. But when Ray Everham left Hendrick Motorsports to go to Dodge, man, I was torn because at that time Everham and Gordon were unbeatable almost, and I know I feared of Gordon going over to Dodge because again of how do you walk away from championships and whatnot of an unknown, but. Yeah.
And who knows, maybe Dodge has already tapped him on the shoulder and that's the whole reason he's leaving. Maybe they've said, we need you to acclimate now so that you're ready. We're ready going into the 26th season.
That would be awesome in my opinion.
I mean, as long as we're speculating, why not?
You get an A+. I only had like an AA- on mine. You get an A+ on that one because that's. You want to know what? Might as well throw it in there. Not only is it going to be Dodge and Rodney Childress, it's going to be Dale Earnhardt Jr. with the team. How about that?
Well, Dale Earnhardt Jr. Yeah, that would be something. But I think Dale's kind of busy on the broadcasting side these days. I can't wait for this prime part of the broadcast because I think it's going to be so much fun watching him and Steve Letarte together.
It is, and going back to this though of that again we'll have to wait and see what happens. I just like I said, I really think there are more issues. I'm not saying it should be a public messy divorce. You did this, you did that thing.
Doesn't have to
but
be.
I don't think that all the information has come out either. They're both saying, hey, we'll just walk away and not say anything. I'm not buying that it was a friendly, it was fun, but let's go do something else. I'm not buying that either, though.
Well, years down the road, when Rodney Childress is on somebody's podcast.
Right, there you
go. So where do we move to next, Jay?
Well, I had one other thought there, but Sharon, you got my head on Dodge and all that, and that kind of went out the window.
Well, go ahead and give us your one other thought.
No, I don't remember what it was because now all I got in my head is, well, he could be going with Dodge. Oh no, I know what it was. We're talking about if it's true. I say if that he doesn't like to share information. Your one option is. What is it? Hayek Racing now with Ricky Stenhouse Jr. It is another Chevy team, but they are a single car team. So maybe that is where he fits in well then as a single car team. That's what it was.
Okay, well, that's certainly a possibility too. But I like the covert action behind the scenes.
Yeah, and like I said, and that may end up what it is because, like I said, it would be tough for a team right now, and maybe it is mid-season then by that he comes back, takes a month or two off, re-energizes or takes that step back, and by that time, some teams are saying, "Hey, we are in a hole and not getting any better, so come help us." We'll have to wait and see.
Well, take your pick, everybody. Choose which speculation you want to go with. And we'll see what actually happens down the road. Okay, do we have any others on our list here?
The only other one, and I don't know that there's a whole lot to talk about, but did happen, Richard Childress Racing. We were talking about appeals, whether or not these teams from this weekend were going to appeal. Richard Childress Racing and Jesse Love lost their appeal, which was not surprising, again, of even making the argument that, hey, it happened during the race or whatever, the part failed. Again, that's not on NASCAR. They're just saying, hey, you weren't legal at the end.
Right. And the idea is that when you put that part on, it's legal at the beginning and it's illegal at the end. So if it's not legal at the end, what did you do wrong to cause it to not be illegal? So
I just hope that, and it seems like here we've seen a few more penalties than we had in a while. I know it was a rare thing to see it. Getting a little worried. I know, and maybe it is because it's 9 races in and teams that except that the teams that are doing it also aren't in a position of desperation, I guess. So that's what really throws me is you're a top running team anyway. Why even push the limit further? I know you're looking for the advantage and to stay ahead of everybody, but it's not worth it, man. I mean, it's not, with what NASCAR has nowadays, and especially Sharon, like you said, if they need to look at, hey, if it's your second or third violation in a year or whatever, we're going to come down even harder. And I can't blame them. If they aren't getting the message, you got to ramp it up. So tread lightly. I mean, I hate to see it, but it's necessary. I mean, there's no other way around it.
Yeah, I agree. And we are seeing more penalties. And the reason I think we're seeing more of it happening is because they become more comfortable now with the car. It's not a novelty anymore. They understand the car and all of the different parts and pieces, if you will. And so they're looking for that competitive advantage. But I'm with you. The ones that don't do it are the underfunded teams because they can't afford to do it. So again, you're taking the money advantage and trying to use it to help you win on the track. Listen to what NASCAR's intent is. NASCAR is trying to level the playing field, and the fact that you are trying to unlevel the playing field by looking for a competitive advantage means that you are intentionally trying to cheat what the system is. Don't do that. Don't put that cloud over your head. Why would you want to do that? I don't understand it for the life of me. I understand there's this thing, if you ain't cheating, you ain't trying, but NASCAR's trying to change that culture. And I think they should change that culture. It's a premier racing league. And I understand, maybe NASCAR needs to give them some kind of avenue to test out some of these things, some of their ideas, but do it with the blessing of NASCAR. If you're going to test out some of these ideas, do it with the blessing of NASCAR. Do it where others can have the advantage as well. But understand the intent is to level the playing field. And I think there's been a lot of positives and very few negatives with NASCAR's intent to level the playing field. I think the pluses far outweigh the negatives.
Well, and here's where I'll go back to, I feel like it would make both sides of, I'll say, happy or content of opening up the rule book to a certain degree. However, I'm with you of, hey, if this is a line, do not cross it. It's going to cost you and cost you heavily if you do. We've given you some playroom, but don't go outside of it or we're going to come down hard. Because there, I think then you can find a little bit more. And yes, I understand, even if it is not a cost of parts or extra wind tunnel time or whatever, just and I'm trying to, in dirt track racing, of where you can adjust the rear end on the suspension. There's 3 different levels, okay? If you lock it where it's only one, you're looking at kind of the IROC series where all the cars are the same, whatever. So that's where I say open up the rule books a little bit. For example, on the spoiler, if you allow it to be a certain range, and I know they have a range, but it's very minimal. I'm just saying some of the areas they could, what they used to call the gray areas, say, okay, we'll put the gray area in the white, but do not go into the black. That's all I'm saying is give them a little bit of room to show some ingenuity or creativity. If they find something in a certain area, then good on them. But I'm all about then of if you
for every team to have that same
right, and that's why I said of that of certainly all the teams can. Then yeah, you may have to hire another engineer or have the better crew chief. But I think even eventually everybody will figure it out. Again, I go back to it's not that you have to share your notebook with another team, but they can see your car, they can go into your garage and look at it or whatever.
Oh, I know. There were times when you didn't come in there with a camera.
Right. But there are things you can do that, you wouldn't even see by the naked eye. Again, just like I say for tire pressures, they don't set a hard amount on that. So some teams are, and they'll go a little bit below even the Goodyear recommended, because again, they've found that works. Okay, that's all I'm saying is say allow that little bit of playroom for teams to work on and play with.
If you give them the playroom and they go outside to a detrimental level, they pay the consequence for it. So you got to set that tolerance to the point that you go outside of this and you're going to pay a price. And I don't mean in penalty. I mean your car's not going to make it.
And I'm okay with that. Like I said, of that response of you ask for that tolerance area or a little bit of playroom, we give it to you, but that is the absolute draw the line hard ending. And if that means suspending you or DQing you from this race as well as the next one, I'm all for it then. Like I said, are you
saying there is no wiggle room anymore? This is the tolerance. If you go outside of this tolerance, there is no buffer zone.
Right.
You're penalized.
Right. We're gonna give you the room to play in this box. We've increased the box. We've given you a little more room in the box, but do not go outside the box. It's not going to be a monetary or whatever. It's going to cost you. And if that even means if it's in this area of violation outside the box, that means you don't make the playoffs. I guarantee you. You've said it. These teams can set it so they're within 1,000th of the line. Make darn sure that 1,000 is inside the line.
Yes. These guys are smart enough to do that. I know they are. They're playing the tolerances, the little buffer zone that NASCAR gives you. They're playing that buffer zone, and it's not working. That's why some of these teams are not appealing, because they know that they played within that buffer zone. And that's why the argument of it happened during the race doesn't fly with NASCAR, because it's your responsibility to make sure it's tight to begin with. You're playing the system.
And that goes back to when they had what they called, because Paul Wolf, or not Paul Wolf, Todd Gordon. No, Todd Gordon, crew chief with Joey Logano, was talking about their encumbered win. It was like, oh yeah, you get to keep the win and all this. No, you're done. You're out. Just like you didn't race. I got no, and I was all in favor of that. The encumbered win and this and that. I was never a fan of that. That just didn't make no sense.
The trophy, you got to give back any money.
Yeah, you're either legal or you're not.
So. Yeah, I agree. And I do think that the penalties, if these penalties continue, they have to get so tough that nobody even thinks about going outside of the tolerance.
And that's where I said you're right. It's pretty much right now they can go in over the line, just take speed, pit road speeding. It's 55. They'll give them a 5 mile per hour buffer. Well, these teams are setting it where they're the 4 over.
Yep.
Okay. I'm saying give them that extra 5, but that's it. If you go over, you're done. Put it in the garage,
Yep. Well, in essence, they are doing that. They are giving them that extra 5. And as soon as they go over it, they're done. Yeah.
But so I think they're
a speeding penalty. They're done for the race.
No. Just most fans can relate to that. I'm just saying within the car, I think there's some area where it is the same concept that NASCAR has a line and a rule, but they give them this tolerance and the teams are playing in that tolerance and then just get a little too close. I am saying they could say, okay, you can work anywhere you want in there up to this, but if it's over that, there is no tolerance and it's not a penalty, it's a DQ. And again, if that DQ includes, hey, not only do you lose points for this week, you're out the next week, I guarantee you teams wouldn't be showing up that close to the line.
Yep, I agree. I agree. Okay, I think we've covered all of our listed hot topics. Let me look in the comments. No comments. So were there any others that maybe we didn't list, but you want to add to our conversation?
No, I was going to just kind of look at, you mentioned it though, of some teams in the top 10. And I know this is a drafting style super speedway. They don't use the term super speedway racing anymore, but drafting style. But just in general, of over the past couple of weeks, I mentioned Ty Gibbs looks to have turned things around. Austin Cindric, who with the win, not only essentially locks himself in, that's not a guarantee yet, but also had gotten up there in points. But with
I've got a story with Austin Cindric.
All right, go ahead.
After Daytona, he was not happy with the result. He called up Kyle Larson and asked Kyle Larson for some advice. Kyle and him have been talking, and he has been listening. Guess who was pushing him to the win?
Yeah, he definitely. Yep, he definitely thanked him in his post race. I remember that.
Yes, I think that's fantastic, though, that Austin Cindric knew that he needed to get advice and went to a fellow competitor and a Chevy at that. He drives a Ford. He went to a Chevy driver and asked for some advice and got it. I love that story.
Well, and that tells you the talent of Kyle Larson. And I've had this discussion. It was a couple of different people, of other fans, if you will, that I was having some discussions with. You like with the fact that they dominate or whatever or not, but to just recognize and appreciate the talent. And that's where you're talking of Austin Cindric just as a driver, be like, hey, this dude is better than me. I can learn from him. I don't care who he drives for, what manufacturer, what team. But when you look at it, and again, they both come from a dirt racing background. And I don't know if that's where the connection was, but you know, they have something there. And if a driver is willing to share that or explain some things, and Kyle Larson is one of those. And I know the way he said it when it comes to the Xfinity kind of rubbed some people the wrong way, but it is of, if I want to be better, I got to race against drivers that are better than me in order to improve. If I'm out there racing, and I'll say kids, but yeah, if I'm beating up on little kids, that doesn't mean I'm great. That means I'm just better than them. If I go up to the big bully and try and do that, well, now I got to put in some work and some training, you know, to hang with the big boys.
Yeah, what he said, though, was so true. A lot of those drivers, we've talked about the change in drivers over the years. Used to be drivers built their own cars, worked on it all week themselves to get it into the race on Sunday. That's not happening as much anymore. That's why I give a driver like Patrick Staropoli just a lot of kudos, because he worked on his cars. He knows what those cars need. He knows what to do to the car to make it better. A lot of these drivers that are coming up through the system right now have never worked on a car. They have no idea what to tell. And by the way, Kyle Larson is one of those drivers. They've never worked on a car themselves. They have no idea, but they're able to communicate to the crew chief enough to tell the crew chief what needs to be done differently in order to make the car work for his driving style. Kyle Larson has put a lot of time and effort into that. But so many of them don't put that time and effort into that. They don't know anything about the mechanical side of the car, and they have trouble communicating with their crew chief what they need. And I think that as part of their development, I think drivers should be put in a position to learn those kind of things so that they can communicate better, at least enough of that information so that they can communicate better with their crew chiefs and tell them what they need. And you know, I think that when you've got a driver like Austin Cindric, who identified himself, there's something I'm not doing, there's something I can be doing better. I'm going to go to the driver that knows that and learn that from them so that I can be better. I think that there's a lot of these newer drivers that when Kyle Larson comes down into their series and shows them that he can lap them several times on the track, there's something better that they can be doing. And they need to take it upon themselves to learn what that is and go about it. But I do think there's something to be said for their driver development and learning the car itself.
Well,
they need to want to do that. Go ahead.
There's two aspects to that, and when you first started talking, it goes back to Days of Thunder. Cole Trickle said, you know, I don't know nothing about cars. I just got in the car and could drive. But to relay that to the crew chief, and that's why we talk about this, and that goes back to Spire Motorsports, or possibly in Spire Motorsports. You have to be able to communicate that and work together. Now, Kyle Larson, when you talk about that, and he admitted that, and I remember when I interviewed him at Chicago, that was his answer. I can't answer that. It has to do with the mechanics of the car. You'd have to ask my crew chief. But like you said, he developed a way to communicate it to his crew chief that his crew chief could understand it and apply it to the car. But okay, there's three sides. Okay. The other is there's a difference between the ones that you're saying of have never worked on the car, but also then have no respect for those that do. Okay. Of, hey, I wrecked this car or whatever, it's not working, fix it. No, that's not the way to go about it. But even Kyle Busch has said he's had to change how he communicates with his crew chief because he can no longer work on the cars or knows how to work on the cars because of the way the cars are. And we've talked about that with this next gen car. It is more about engineering than it is about mechanical. And there again, Kyle acknowledged that. He said, I just have to then relay to my crew chief and car chief what I'm looking for and want so that they can apply it because I don't know how. He made the statement, he said, I used to be able to, while I'm driving it, say, hey, the right rear needs more air pressure or a round up on the wedge or whatever. He said, that's not the case no more. That's not how it's done. So he has to explain the handling and what he's looking for, and they know and make the adjustment. But it is still that growth and change. And that's why I'm hoping at least throughout the rest of the year, we see more from Kyle Busch because he's aware of that and making that change.
Yes, and you're right. It does have to do with respect and understanding that it costs money when those cars are wrecked. You're not in a video game where you just hit the reset button and you get a brand new car that pops up. It takes time and effort to replace that car, and not to mention the money that it takes to replace that car. And you have to have some respect for that because you're not going to keep racing if you keep wrecking cars. And that is part of the growth curve in the truck series and the Xfinity series for a lot of these drivers. But you bring up a very valid point as well. Even the old-time drivers, like we're talking about Kyle Busch being an old-time driver now, even those drivers have to change the way that they do it. But they want to, and that's
exactly
that you have to put into the minds, the hearts and souls of these younger drivers. You have to want to put in the time and the effort to be better at your craft and to know what it is you have to do differently in order to be better. And part of that is the communication. And you have to recognize your communication means a lot to what happens with your crew chief. So, and you have to improve your communication and improve your understanding of what's happening inside your car to be able to communicate that to your crew chief. So there's a lot to racing, and these drivers are on a learning curve. I get it, especially in the Xfinity and Truck Series. But we've got one driver that I'm not going to mention his name. You'll know who it is, who's advanced to the Cup Series and still hasn't learned some of the learning curve kind of things that he needs to learn.
Well, and there again, and I won't use a name, but this discussion came up a while back of the drivers that come with the sponsor can carry an attitude of, you can't fire me or whatever, because if I leave, the money goes with me. And I understand where that's an issue. It's not common, but we have seen that kind of in the past. But one big thing, and I know it was, I think 2 years ago, Jeff Bodine talked about that. I did an article, or had an article written that he was involved in, of, it's different when you get paid based off of how you finish versus your paycheck or salary is the same no matter what. That makes a huge difference in how you race and take care of your equipment.
It does. And if I were a team owner, that's the way I would do it, based on how you finish. And if you wreck my car, you have to pay a certain percentage of that car getting repaired.
Like I said, I'd be one of those car owners. It'd be tough to work with me because, I'd be like, no, you ain't going to carry that kind of attitude with me.
Exactly right. So anyway, I don't know how we got off into that, but I don't have anything more on my list. Do you?
No, that was it. Like I said, just kind of looking at both the results from this week as well as then the point standings. See a little bit of shifting. It's that time of year again. Either you're hitting on it or you've hit on something bad and dropping. But just looking at the playoffs, where the cut line could be, and we've seen some good runs by some of those, both in the Xfinity. I know we got the pack of rookies still just outside the cut line. Like I said, I'm waiting to see when that floodgate opens and these rookies start moving in, because that means somebody's moving out. So looking forward to the rest of the season for sure.
Well, we've got the 1.5 mile track back at Texas Motor Speedway this coming weekend. And the ARCA East Series is going to be racing at Nashville Fairgrounds. And that's going to be a fun race as well. So we'll be back. Watch for more coming soon, because we will be back after at the end of this week, in order to preview the upcoming races at Texas Motor Speedway and Nashville Fairgrounds for the ARCA Menard Series East. And we'll be back on Monday night with the reviews of those races, as well as our Hot Topic Sound Off here on Fan4Racing Radio. So be sure to tune in, and we'll look forward to seeing you, I guess, in our next video. But Jay, talk about your week this week.
Well, you can follow me on Facebook, Mopar MJ. Facebook is Michael Hoosman, and then Twitter and Instagram, Mopar MJ8. As always, got a very busy week ahead with different organizations I work with throughout the week. This weekend, I believe we aren't racing. We raced this past weekend, had a good weekend at Jackson Motor Speedway. I'd say off weekend, but it's not, because we have Columbus, Mississippi has their Market Street Festival, and I got a couple of different things I'm going to be involved in there. So support the hometown, and local businesses are always a part of that. So enjoy that. That's what I got going on this weekend.
Okay, well, and I'm watching all the races. I'm at Fan4Racing site on Twitter, and then on Facebook it is Fan4Racing blog and radio, and we post all of our recaps there, as well as on our website, of course. But then all of the YouTube videos are also posted over Facebook and Twitter, or I'm sorry, X, it is now known as. So make sure you check us out in both of those locations. And then we haven't done any commentary articles yet this season, but I'm brewing up some. So stay tuned for more in that regard. And we do post our I'm looking for a way to post kind of a composite of all of our upcoming shows as well, with links so that you know how to find us over here on YouTube for the specific shows that we're doing. And I will tell you, we can't post the videos. It was using too much of our space. And so posting the videos over on our website used up a lot of our space very quickly. So that's why we'll be posting links versus the actual YouTube videos. But we do have the links over at fan4racing.com for how you can get to Fan4Racing Radio. Up in our links bar at the top of the site is our Fan4Racing Radio link for right here on YouTube. So I definitely encourage you to use that as well. So with that, I think we're ready to call it a night. I do want to say thank you for watching. We appreciate those of you who do tune in during our live stream and watch even on the afterwards on the podcast portion. We appreciate it, and leave comments for us. We'd love to hear from you. I think we finally did get one comment from the weekend of our post over the weekend. So we encourage you to continue to comment over here at Fan4Racing Radio. So it doesn't matter which it is. Huh?
Yeah, I want to add to that, Sharon, with the thank you and appreciation. I know our subscribers have gone up again. This is new for us here at Fan4Racing, switching over to the YouTube platform. Sharon has done a great job of building that and working on it each and every week and changing things up and learning the system. But so make sure you share it. I know over the weekend we had a high for us as far as viewership and whatnot. Again, just appreciate it. Continue to share, tell your buddies, and we'll continue to build and try and improve. And that does take feedback from y'all. So please share.
Yes, thank you so much. We did get an uptick over the weekend, and we do appreciate that. And welcome to all of our new subscribers. We appreciate you for subscribing and tuning in. So let's keep the momentum going.
All right. Enjoy the week, and we'll talk to you on probably Friday. I'll talk to you in a little bit about that.
Oh, okay. We'll talk to you in a few minutes. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you in the next stream. Take care now.